Dorothy Must Die, Chapter 31. I was vaguely aware of my body moving, my hands clenching and unclenching. Slowly I reached toward Dorothy's feet. "Astrid," Julia warned, yanking my elbow back. I ignored her. I wanted those shoes. "Astrid," she said again, this time angrily. She snapped her fingers right in my face, tearing my eyes away from Dorothy's feet. I blinked, looking up at Julia. I felt like myself again, and I knew that the shoes had been doing something to me. Julia just glared, as if to say, "Didn't I warn you?" Dorothy was busy holding up a bottle of polish to the light, thinking about her impending manicure. When I glanced in her direction, I saw her eyes narrow and her mouth twitch up in a tiny sneer. Had she noticed? Did she know what her shoes were doing? "Astrid," Julia ordered firmly, "the princess needs her hair brushed." 1,000 strokes exactly, Dorothy snapped, still not looking up at me. I took a deep breath and moved behind her. I grabbed the brush from my pocket and pulled it slowly through Dorothy's thick auburn locks. Her hair smelled like lemons and sunshine. I expected there to be a rotten note underneath, but there wasn't. It was all sweetness and light. This is what evil smells like, I realized. 1, 2, 3, 4. I counted silently, being careful not to yank too hard when I hit a rare tangle. It was actually sort of relaxing. I felt much better now that I had something to focus on other than the shoes. "Let's do the hearts," Dorothy finally decided. "Use the pink glitter, blue for the base." She extended her hands to Julia, and I realized there was something gnarled about them. The rest of Dorothy was perfect, but her hands looked like an old woman's. Julia pulled up a stool and picked out the first color. Dorothy began to hum a slow waltz under her breath, while Julia got to work. Julia was an artist. Her fingers moved delicately and quickly over Dorothy's nails, tracing the outlines of tiny hearts without even the tiniest mistake. Still, you could still tell it wasn't easy. Julia's brow crinkled in concentration, and it began to shine with sweat as she worked. "Tell me the gossip," Dorothy demanded. "No one ever tells me anything. There must be something interesting going on in this palace of mine. I know you know. The servants always do." "Let me think," Julia said. As she spoke, she glanced up at me, probably to check my progress. I was at 200. I met her eyes, flashed her a reassuring smile, but then nearly nicked the back of Dorothy's ear with the brush. Dorothy didn't even notice. She just went on humming her stupid waltz. But Julia did, flinching on my behalf at the close call. That's how it happened. Julia's hand slipped. A drop of nail polish fell from the brush. I watched it go as if in slow motion. The sparkly pink polish landed in a blob in the pink carpet. Dorothy shrieked. The thing is, the polish almost matched the color of the carpet. Even if it wouldn't come out, it was just a tiny little drop. No one would notice. No one would notice. But Dorothy would know. "You idiot!" she screamed. Julia didn't move. Her lips twitched at the corners of her frozen smile. "Princess Dorothy, your highness, I am so very sorry. She dropped to her knees in panic, dabbing frantically at the carpet with a handkerchief to blot out her mistake, but Dorothy put her hand out to halt the maid. "Don't. You'll just smear it and make it worse." Julia looked up, eyes impossibly wide from above her frozen smile, but Dorothy was over it. Sort of. She just shook her head. "Should I send for soap and water?" Julia asked. "I'm certain I can have it out in a moment." "Soap and water," Dorothy repeated, snorting. She muttered something under her breath, and a sizzle of energy sparkled from her fingertips. The minuscule stain instantly disappeared. "The atrocious mess is not the point, Julia. The point is that you're careless. Very careless. I'm used to better from you." "I'm sorry," Julia repeated, still trembling, sitting back down on her stool. "I'm very sorry. I can't imagine what came over me." I swallowed. In a way, Julia was covering for me. I distracted her. Dorothy's voice suddenly filled with syrupy kindness. "Oh, Julia, dear, you can't cry over a spilled little bit of nail polish. I'll think of some way of you to make it up for me." I resumed my brushing. 201. I hadn't forgotten my place. Julia picked up the bottle of polish. I expected her to be relieved, but she was still quivering. "But I'll just need to think of the appropriate punishment," Dorothy said. Yes, Your Highness. I wonder what it should be. Julia's hand was shaking so much that she had to put the bottle down again. Did I tell you to stop? Dorothy asked. Julia's eyes widened, and she picked the bottle back up to continue. Her mouth was still stretched ear to ear, but the rest of her face was crumpled in terror. This was what Dorothy did to people. I had known Dorothy was cruel, but the joy she took in her cruelty filled me with disgust. I thought of Madison Pendleton and all her minions, the people who had taken the same delight in tormenting me back in school. I thought of Gert, and of Indigo, and of Ollie, hanging from the little post by the side of the road. I thought of all the new orphans in the village of Pumperdink. Then another came to me. It seemed so clear. I hadn't heard from the Order since I'd gotten here. Maybe they'd forgotten about me. Regardless, I was within clear cutting distance. What if this was my best chance? If I was going to kill someone, I need to be in control, and not rely on someone else to tell me when the time was right. Knox had made that mistake in the woods. He'd waited for Gert and Mombi before attacking the lion, and look where that had gotten us. It had gotten Gert killed. I could do it now. Dorothy was distracted, completely absorbed with punishing Julia. She would never see it coming. She wouldn't even have time to scream. My heart was racing, but I took a deep breath. I didn't pause in my brushing. 307. I shifted positions ever so slightly and dropped my free hand out of Julia's line of sight, just behind Dorothy's back. My knife materialized in my hand, its warmth spreading up through my arm. I wrapped my fingers tightly around it. No one had noticed. I was inches away from her neck, without even consciously casting a spell. I heard Dorothy's blood pulsing through her veins. I had the bitch right where I wanted her. I pulled my elbow back and raised the knife so that it was just a centimeter from Dorothy's spine. Would it be quicker to slit her throat or stab her in the back? I hesitated. A moment ago, I'd been possessed by a pair of pretty shoes. Was that happening again? Were they controlling me right now? No, I wanted to kill Dorothy. I could undo everything she's done, return the beauty and magic to Oz, create a happily ever after. It was all just one blade stroke, and one seriously ruined carpet away. Was I ready, though? Was I ready to be Amy the assassin? God knows Dorothy deserved it, but... Dorothy let out a high-pitched, ear-shattering scream that rustled the rows of dresses. She jumped up from her chase, knocking it over. The brush snagged in her hair and flew out of my hand. I froze, unsure whether to hide the knife or lunge forward and stab her. "Guards!" she bellowed. Shit, I thought in panic. I made a split-second decision, made her an assassin, and willed the knife to disappear. I was pretty sure Julia hadn't seen it, but had Dorothy? Had she sensed the magic? I decided playing dumb was the best option. The Tin Woodman appeared in a burst of smoke, his axe poised to attack. "Your Majesty," he said. "What's wrong?" My eyes darted around, looking frantically for a way out, just in case Dorothy pointed a finger in my direction. Instead, Dorothy had righted the chase and climbed atop it, shaking, but also managing to delicately smooth out her robe. Julia stared up at her in confusion, and I followed her lead. Dorothy could barely get out the words. She stuttered. There was a... She pointed to the corner, and every muscle in my body relaxed when I saw it wasn't me she had been reacting to. She had no idea I'd been about 1 second away from killing her. "Catch it," she wheezed, pointing to the corner just in time for her to see a tiny brown ball of fur streaking under the skirt of one of her floor-length gowns. "Kill it!" Dorothy screamed, jumping ridiculously from foot to foot. A mouse. It was just a mouse. The Tin Woodman looked at Dorothy with concern. "Of course, my princess," he said with something approaching actual tenderness in his voice. He stepped forward and began to carefully pull the clothes aside. "I can't imagine how upsetting this must be for you." "No," Dorothy said. She reached out blindingly, found the top of my head, and used it for balance, and she lowered herself back into the chase. Her fears seemed to have suddenly twisted into something else. "Not you." "Princess?" the Tin Woodman asked, confused. Dorothy thrust a long half-manicured nail at Julia. You catch it." The maid's face was stoic. "Yes, ma'am," she said quietly. Julia dropped to her hands and knees and began to crawl across the floor, disappearing behind the dresses. We all watched her. "Did I tell you to stop, Amanda?" Dorothy snapped. My hair's not going to brush itself now, is it? I picked up the brush. 328. I didn't even know what I was feeling anymore, so I went back to work. 329. The garments rustled, and every now and then we caught a glimpse of Julia as she searched, but 90 strokes of the brush later, she still hadn't emerged. Dorothy, the Tin Woodman, and I all watched intently. It would be an honor if you let me catch the foul creature, the Tin Woodman suggested finally. With my speed and training, it would take me no time at all. No, you'll get oil on my dresses, Dorothy said irritably. I guess I have to do everything around here. Even with a concerted effort not to look directly at them, I noticed that Dorothy's shoes were glittering brighter than before. She twirled a finger in the air, and a pink bubble materialized at the tip of her nail. Come out, Julia, she ordered, now that you've disappeared on me on every possible level. After a few tense seconds, Julia emerged on her hands and knees and crawled back toward us, her face ashen, but still smiling eerily, her hair messy and matted with sweat. Stay, Dorothy commanded. Julia froze on her hands and knees. Dorothy gave a little flick, and the pink bubble went spinning. It twisted and darted in the air the same way Nox's tracing charm had, back in the forest outside Pumperdink, the night that Gert died. After a few seconds, it zipped into the pink folds of the clothes, and not 30 seconds later returned, now rolling along the ground. Inside the glowing bubble gum orb, a tiny mouse, barely bigger than my thumb, squirmed and scratched. 499. I kept on brushing. The ball swung across the carpet right up to where Julia still knelt. The maid looked up at Dorothy in fearful anticipation. Pick it up, Dorothy said. Without rising to her feet, Julia complied, and as she did, the bubble faded away, leaving just the mouse in her hand. Now kill it, Dorothy said. Julia paused, looking down at the mouse's little face. But, Dorothy, your Majesty, do it. How? Even the Tin Woodman seemed a little confused as he looked on. He cocked his head curiously and swung his axe over his shoulder, waiting to hear what the princess had in mind. Dorothy giggled girlishly. Oh, Julia, she said. I knew you were stupid, but I didn't know you were that stupid. I mean, all you have to do is squeeze. But, Julia said. Julia, it's you or the mouse, Dorothy said, the sweet girly tone gone from her voice and replaced by an icy coldness. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Dorothy's favorite maid took a deep breath and closed her eyes and made a fist around the little animal. She clenched it tight, and as she did, I heard a single squeal. Her eyebrows scrunched together in distress. Make sure it's dead, Dorothy instructed. Julia clenched tighter. A trickle of blood spilled out from between her fingers, and she placed her other hand underneath in time to catch it before it hit the carpet. Good girl, Dorothy cooed. See, was that so bad? Julia opened her fists where the mouse lay inert, now just a little ball of fur and blood. What should I do with it? She asked in a strangled voice. You have pockets in that frock of yours, don't you? Dorothy asked. I want you to hold on to it, to remind you of what happens when you disappoint me the way you did today, as well as to make sure I never see one of those disgusting creatures in my palace again. Without a word, Julia took the mouse's little corpse and placed it in the front of her apron. Dorothy applauded in delight. Wonderful. All is well. Now go wash those hands. I can't have any mouse guts on my nails now, can I? Julia stood and left the room, and Dorothy let out a little giggle. She's lucky I didn't make her eat it, she said, and looked directly at me for the first time. Isn't that right, Allison? I nodded mutely, literally biting my tongue. The Tin Woodman chuckled adoringly. 560. I counted off in my head, trying to keep my temper in check. I should have stabbed her.